So we'll continue on with our concept of rest and how it supports play. The first way we're going to look at it is quite obvious, is rest from competing activities. Rest as a prerequisite of play. Basically that there's rest from enough freedom from competing activities to be able to allow play to happen. If a child needs to be free to play. And so it's like the weeds in a garden, or other plants, for instance, can be very good activities in themselves, but if it crowds out play, it has a deleterious effect, and that effect that is adverse. This must be safeguarded, and this is the thing: is that play and rest have been like. We try and get as little as possible because it interferes with real progress, or that's our idea, is that the answer is not in rest, the answer is in work, the answer is in achievement, in producing. The answer is in outcomes, not in this. And so these are quite obvious, enough freedom from the pressure to produce and perform, that we must give this to our children. That will come soon enough. They will have to live in a work world soon enough where everything is about outcome. But can we give them some freedom from this? Can we as parents, can we as teachers, can we as caregivers, can we provide enough freedom from the pressure to produce and perform? So much now is on being able to develop particular talents or gifts. As a dancer, as in athletics, in terms of academics, and always the idea is you have to start early to get ahead. But in starting early to get ahead and developing these unique, specific potentials, you lose your human potentials. The sacrifice is that you don't grow into being fully human. And so that is, I've struggled with this so many times with parents over the years. And how is my child to be a competitive dancer? How are they be a competitive skater? How can they be competitive in terms of academics if we don't push ahead? And I say, well, but there is a cost. There is a cost to this. They could be the best dancer in the world, but if they do not develop their human potential, they will not feel fulfilled. There will be no well-being. They may win at Olympics, but there will be no sense of well-being, and that is far more important than being able to be the best skier in the world, or to be able to get ahead academically. So enough freedom from the pressure to produce and perform. Of course, enough freedom. This is a new problem we have. Enough freedom from screens and stimulation. It's estimated, according to one research that involved 20 countries, that 80% of our children under 2 years of age are already exposed to digital devices. Screens are becoming commonplace. Our children spend a lot of time behind screens. In North America, the average child spends, because it involves now in education and learning too, over 10 hours of screen time a day. This is monumental. This is completely changing everything. And screens is taking in, whereas play is expressive, it is coming out. It is much more important that things come out of a child, and there has to be enough coming out to be able to take the coming in, to be able to take the information. We don't give enough room for the coming out of a child, and play is the coming out, always the coming out. And so enough room for this. Great concerns from all over, physicians, the development from the amount of time that children are spending behind screens. And of course, here's the difficulty. Digital devices ushered in the information age, which many suggest is even more profound than the industrial age and the final impact it will have. And it ushered in the information age, and as you know, that happened because we finally figured out how to encode information in ones and zeros. And in so doing, we were able to store information in very small spaces. We were able to transfer information, and this ushered in the information age. Now, because school is about information, it became natural that schools would use this to provide universal access to information. But the problem is that these information about the world is not what children are looking for if they're not healthy emotionally. What they're looking for is the preeminent need of all human beings, which is togetherness. And so as soon as they master a digital device, it will be used for connectivity rather than to learn about their world. And so that has become the preoccupation. So the digital devices, what has shaped the digital world is our human need for togetherness. Over 4 billion of us, or rather 1 billion of us, are on Facebook. And if there wasn't a need for togetherness, there would be no Facebook. It is that kind of need. And so it's not only about the information, it's about the preoccupation. And that interferes with the coming out. Enough freedom from structured activity. Again, many, especially in Canada, United States, many parents find themselves as going from one activity to another activity to another activity. School is a structured activity, and then there's all the different kinds of lessons, all the different kinds of recreational kinds of things, all of these things, and it's structured activity. And again, there's no space. There's no space in this time to play. And of course, enough freedom from instruction and schooling. This is absolutely essential. When there's not enough freedom from this. And again, the idea is as well, but in the recess, in the lunch hour, there's time to play. But as I said, that is not a play. The needs of togetherness are so great with children. That is about huge consciousness of who likes who, and who wants to be with whom, and who isn't invited. And that is the ultimate work of, as we'll go and look at it later, that's the ultimate work of an individual. And so this is a time when the cortisol levels actually go up. This is not a time for parasympathetic nervous activity. This is a time for high sympathetic nervous system activity. And so it is not play. They come back after recess and lunch hour not rested. They come back exhausted. And so this is the idea that this is, the only thing that recess and lunch hour provides is some time off for the teachers. It is not about the children. And so again, it would be a whole attitude, a whole way of thinking that would be necessary for this. And so again, schooling and instruction is placed earlier and earlier in a child's life. This material entered into the ministry in Germany, education ministry, and so they decided that all of their 4-year-old and 5-year-old kindergarten kinds of things would need to be play-based. And so they legislated this in terms of that it would be play-based. The research showed in the research that when they looked at play-based schools rather than work-based schools, the play-based ones, when they had outcome 3-4 years down the way, were much bigger than those that were based on instruction and schooling. But as soon as this happened, then they brought in a curriculum of play, and then they prescribed it. And of course, it lost all its benefits. It's just what happens when people think, okay, now we've got this, we'll tell children what they have to do. And then the whole thing became outcome again, rather than play-based. But it was a good idea. It was a very good idea, but it got badly managed. And the research on this is quite astounding when you compare play-based programs to instruction-based programs, that the outcomes are much more superior. But again, our idea generally in Canada, as well as I believe here in Sweden, is that you need to get ahead. The more schooling, the better. The earlier you start, the better. And that is the idea, so that you can produce. And of course, that goes against everything we understand in nature about the rest-work cycle and about the whole season of play that needs to happen, and how all the forward edge is in play, not in work. We must be very careful about this. No wonder where our systems are, we're having difficulty. Those who start later are finishing better, and those who start early are doing worse. And so it's the opposite of what we had thought. But there is a deeper rest that I want to talk about. I'll call it true rest. A rest that forwards development, not only a rest from competing activities, a very deep rest. And again, we'll look at the phenomena. What constitutes true rest? And by true rest, at least two of these kinds of rest involve parasympathetic nervous system activity. Deep rest, the kind of waves in the brain that have to do with an organism at rest. And so what is it that does that? One is rest from the pursuit of proximity. That we have discovered is our preeminent need, and what most of us are working at. And if children work at it, it interferes directly with their sense of rest. And we've taken a wrong turn this way in our sophisticated societies of actually making them work at this, and I'll explore that. They also need to rest from their futile endeavors, from doing things that don't work or cannot work. Because if they do not rest from this, they do the same things over and over again that do not work. You'll know adults in your life who do the same thing over and over again. It's never worked. It never will work. And yet they repeat these things. There's no adaptation. There's no learning from mistakes. They have no rest from their futile endeavors. And so there needs to be a rest. And so we need to find rest when things do work. We need to find rest from what doesn't work. And there's a different kind of rest, is that children are born, again, with their emotional system, giving them hundreds of wired-in predispositions to act. They're moved in certain ways under certain conditions. Moved to venture forth, moved to caution, moved to tears, moved to, and there's all of these kinds of things, moved to for vengeance. They're moved to do this. Now, this evolved in the limbic system, along with all the other mammals. This evolved as the brain's way to be able to make sure that survival happened, and to make sure that there was some unfolding of the potential of the organism. But our life is to be governed ultimately not by impulses, but by intentions. And so the very definition of maturity is for one's life to be reflective of one's values, not one's impulses. In fact, if one's life is reflected by impulses, that is the very essence of immaturity. So we all start there. But young children, their life is not reflected of their intentions at all. They may have the best intentions in the world, but that is very little of what they do is a result of their intentions, is a result of their impulses. And that is what is supposed to change. And so the whole system needs to come to rest, as well as impulses in a given situation. If a child feels like hitting his sister, that is an impulse to feel like hitting because there was frustration. Well, if he's formed an intention not to hit when he is frustrated, when does that child, his actions, become a result of intentions rather than impulses? Do you follow me here? That's huge. That's huge. And his impulses then must be arrested or stopped, which is the essential meaning of rest. They must be stopped to make room for the life to be determined by intentions. We could all ask ourselves, how much is my life, if anybody looked at me or came from Mars or whatever it is, and they took a look at my life, how much of my actions, my life, my interactions are reflective, are a function of my intentions, my values, and how much am I driven by impulse? And I would get a good idea of how much I have come to realize my full potential as a human being. I would like another 2 lifetimes to work on this. I don't think I'm very far. I feel sometimes as I'm running out of time. I'm 66 years of age, and I think, oh my goodness, I've got a long ways to go. When I look at my average day, and I said, did this day reflect my values? Did this day reflect my intentions? Or was I driven by impulse? Did I eat only when I decided to eat, or did food just happen to me? What is it? Did I relate in a way that reflects my values and intentions, or did it reflect my emotion and my impulses? You see this, and so I'm not very impressed with my maturity, and I would like some more time. But this is the rest that forwards development. This kind of rest. Now, I'll start with the rest. I'll cover all of these areas. They're all big areas, but they all capture the essence of rest. But we'll take a few minutes on each. First of all, rest from the work of attachment. And again, this has been the huge discovery in the 1950s that attachment, our need for togetherness, was the preeminent need. It isn't the first time it was said. Plato said that. We are social beings. Our preeminent need is togetherness, and our forward edge is play. It has been said many times in many ways, but it was the first time that it was said in a way to be a scientific study, that we had a term, attachment, that was given, that we could begin to study the preeminent need for togetherness, not only in humans, but in particles, in atoms, in molecules, in plants, in heavenly bodies, that the Einstein and Newton studied the attachment forces of the universe. And, the fact that atoms, particles get stuck on each other, humans get stuck on each other. This is the first principle of the universe, is a pursuit and preservation of proximity. Proximity, Latin for nighness. And so it very quickly was established as even more important than food, is that, in fact, children, when they pursue togetherness, they have 35 instincts when they're born, including the sucking, all of these instincts. It enables their getting food. And when their parents are attached to them, they will feed them. And so it is the attachment which enables their survival needs. That's why it's preeminent. And that's why we have the construct of suicide. We have the construct of things as where we can have things that are perfectly well, or in Korea, where we had all of the, after the Korean War in the 1950s, and the study in the orphanages, where all the physical needs of the children were met, but there was no contact, there was no togetherness that was met, no touch, no sense of belonging, and there was 80% mortality rate in these orphanages. And now they find that, again, children who are facing separation, adults who are facing separation, in loneliness, for instance. And we study this with mice in terms of social deprivation, and with monkeys, that this has the highest impact of all. We need togetherness. And our body doesn't relax. Our mind doesn't relax. We don't find rest until we find sufficient togetherness. This is absolutely essential. And our children long for it. So attachment is what most needs to work for children. It most needs to work. And so if we don't make it work for them, then they end up working for it. And if we use the relationship against them, then they work even more to keep us close. And that is what is happening with our children, and now with each other. My book, Hold On to Your Kids in English, is largely about the attachment needs of children and how they've replaced adults in their life with other children because there's been too much space. They haven't been able to hold on to us. And so they attach to other individuals and attach to their peers. And because there's no security there, they become totally preoccupied with togetherness. That is what created Facebook. That is what created the social media. Without that pure orientation, it would have not existed. It's not about children connecting with their grandparents. It's not about hierarchical attachments. It is about pure relationships. So attachment is what most needs to work. The nurturance for growing into one's potential is found in relationship. That's where the nurturance is. That is, the first gear in the amygdala is always about togetherness. Only when that is met sufficiently, that need for togetherness and closeness and contact, is there freedom to now move to grow into potential. So the nurturance comes from that preeminent need for togetherness. The capacity for relationship. Now, don't get thrown off the word attachment. It's only a scientific word. What we're talking about here is togetherness. What we're talking about is relationship. And the capacity for relationship, we find, is a basic human potential. And this must fully develop first in order to deliver the nurturance needed for growth. Think of a plant and how the root system needs to develop first to be able to glean the nurturance to support the growth. And so the roots become most important. And so this is where our investment should be. All the investment should be in the root system of this to deliver the nurturance. And the key to nurturance is in being temporarily released from the pursuit of proximity. So the plant, the roots must find what they are seeking for. And if they find what they're seeking for, they find a pocket of nurturance, of water, of nutrients. And then they find what they are seeking for, and there's a release, and growth is a result. And so always when you look at a plant, I look at the plants, almost daily when I'm at home, and I often comment on, I see you found what you're looking for. You can see the plant. All of a sudden there's flourishing. And the flourishing is because the roots have been fruitful. The plant has found that place. In particular, my garden is sitting on top of a hard pan, and the plants actually have to break through that hard pan. And when I transplant, I can't get through that. It's too solid. And the plants finally find their way. And when they find their way, they start shooting up. And I'm always celebrating. Yes, yes. And then if they don't, of course, they just wither. And I always know when they found it because it's just wonderful. They absolutely flourish. And the children will become stuck in the pursuit and preservation of proximity if their seeking is not answered. And so those of you that have heard me before or have seen me on YouTube or whatever it is will be familiar with this diagram. But nevertheless, I repeat it. It is my attempt to put the whole struggle for human togetherness, the whole preeminent need to put it together, because we look for different kinds of togetherness, different kinds of relationship. And this is a story about the unfolding of the human capacity for relationship. It goes through a development. It too has a potential. Infants have a very primitive way of relating. And the relating should unfold. I'll use a diagram of a plant, and we have the potential for growth on top of the soil and the root system underneath. It, I think, is quite appropriate here that we can't see underneath the soil. And largely in society, we've been unaware of the attachment needs of children. We just see the results. We don't see what's underneath the soil. And so this is what the ultimate challenge is to be able to articulate it, to find a language of it, to bring it into consciousness so that we become aware of it. It turns out that there are about 6 steps to the unfolding of the potential of relationship. And it turns out that the first 6 years are critical. And it turns out, like a plant, that there must be continuous contact with the soil, continuous contact of togetherness. And nature is trying to answer the question, basically, and this is what it's trying to answer, is trying to answer the question after the first here is about, the first part is about the seeking to be with. After the seeking to be with is there, the whole answer that nature is trying to do is how to be close when apart. How to preserve contact and closeness when away. And so that is the answer. Think of this think of how we would do this if there wasn't the cell phone, if there wasn't digital devices, okay? So you've got to think back because this wasn't part of human evolution. And now you know why digital devices became repurposed for this, because this answered the basic human problem of all. You see, when we get attached, what is a 2-year-old, what is a 1-year-old preoccupied? How to stay close when? Apart. That is the biggest thing. And that is where the most stress is, the most wounds are, and how to stay close is, and the biggest apart is death, and how to preserve a sense of connection, how to bridge that. That's the biggest issue for humans. And so the first part is very, very basic, is a child wants to be in touch, in sight, in hearing, in smell. And these are very important. We don't do this nearly enough. If mothers, parents, and grandparents are very intuitive, they will automatically, when a child cannot be in sight, help a child to be in hearing and sound. If the child cannot be in sound, then in smell, to take some of your clothes with your smells and wrap it around the baby. Always, and if it can't be in touch, then in another way. In intuitive times, you always made sure that the baby was in some way connected through the senses. And smell is a huge thing with infants. We don't do this. We try to figure out how a child can separate as soon as possible. We don't understand that the whole challenge is how to keep a child close. And hence the title of my book in English, To Hold On to Your Children. It's our job to be able to preserve contact and closeness, because without it, they can't develop the capacity for a relationship and ultimately to develop their potential. But this is the beginning. As soon as a child can toddle, can walk on their own 2 feet, at that point that the child can toddle, the brain goes, we have to now have another way of keeping the child close when apart. And this is to be like. And so this becomes huge for the child to imitate, to emulate. Now we know this is the secret of language acquisition for all animals, is through imitation, that we talk like those to whom we're attached. So the child starts walking like, talking like, imitating, being like, taking on the same form. And if a child is not attached properly, they don't take on the form properly. But this is all natural, and this is part of the resolution. But if there is success in this, and togetherness is answered, then the first thing the child realizes is they're a bit different. And so you have another threat to the relationship. And so nature has to answer that. And it answers it in a beautiful way. In the 3rd year of life, when the child is just realizing his differentness, becoming to realize that he is not the same in every way as mom and dad, and so on and so on. And then the child wants to be a part of. Now togetherness is to belong, to be a part of. And so the child longs to be part of, for you to be able to speak in language, my boy, my girl, that you're part of, and part of the family. And so now being part of is to be close. And in the wake of that, the child begins to interpret closeness in another way. Closeness is to take the same side as, to be on the same side. And these are very deep instincts in a child, to stand up for, to serve and obey. And these are deep instincts that are there. Now notice that the instinct to obey doesn't surface until the 3rd year of life, and it is only if a child is properly attached. If a child is not properly attached, you will have all kinds of behavior problems. So in actual fact, the answer to a lot of the things that we're concerned about in terms of management would be answered naturally if the attachment unfolded as it should. But many of our children, you see, if we send our children away from us in their second year, and they're already full of the need to be like, who are they going to be predisposed to attach to? Their grandparents, their uncles and aunts, their parents? Does it look like that they will be attached to? Each other, because it will appear that they're more like each other. And so by the time they move to belonging, instead of belonging to their moms and dads, belonging to their uncles and aunts, belonging to their family, who is it occurs that they belong to? Each other. So whose side are they taking? Their peers. And so societies who have pushed children to be separate earlier than later have huge problems, and this construct of peer orientation that I talk about is crippling our societies in the United States, in Canada, in Britain, in New Zealand, Australia, and as well as you in Sweden. It is becoming now, you see, that children, they're more important to each other than those that are meant to raise them, their teachers, their parents, their uncles and aunts. But all because we're not doing this. You see, nature had in mind that there was going to be some time. In today's society, there's no time. We are in a hurry. We have no time to allow the capacity for relationship to unfold. If everything goes well here, by the 4th year of life, a child interprets closeness as mommy and daddy hold close that which they hold dear. And so the child wants to become dear to be significant to matter to be important to. And you tell stories to a 4-year-old who's attached to you about how important they are, how special they are, how significant, and they just love those stories. They just want you to tell the stories over and over again. Because now they know that if they matter to you, the closeness is ensured. And so they want to know, and they're deeply hurt by any sign of not mattering. That is how nature is answering this, of how to be close when apart. And it all unfolds in their personality. Their personality becomes more dear. Now, if everything goes as it should, the limbic system now opens up all its stops. Now, emotion represents the most vulnerable part of us because we can get deeply hurt. But this is the time, if there's been continuity of contact, if there is a sense of closeness that is unbroken, the limbic system moves to its 5th step, which is a phenomenal step in about the 5th year of life, and the child gives his heart to whomever he's attached. If he's attached to grandma, he loves grandma. If he's attached to the kitty, he loves the kitty. And if he's attached to you, when it is your birthday or Mother's Day or Father's Day, there's cards with hearts all over. And I wish I would have collected all the hearts my children gave me. I do have a collection of some 50 hearts and cards and drawings and so on. Some of them are so precious that when they were 5 and 6 years of age, are so precious. I often get asked, and I often ask parents, when did your children give you their heart? And they'll often say, well, what do you mean? Well, when did they say I love you in a heartfelt way? When was their cards full of hearts? This is in every culture. When did you feel you had their heart? Well, I don't know. I'm not here to talk about this. I'm here to talk about their behavior. How do I help my adolescent with his drug problem? How do I help him with his school performance? And I say to the parents, we were never meant to deal with children whose hearts we did not have. We cannot be the mother they need, the father they need, without having their hearts. We can't even be the teacher they need. We can't influence their mind if we don't have their hearts. I couldn't be the grandfather my grandchildren need unless I had their hearts. I may be the top expert in Canada in parenting. I taught parent-child relations in university for over 12 years. My book is the most popular in Canada in terms of parenting. That does not make me a good parent. What enables me to be a parent and a grandparent is because I have the hearts of my children. If I didn't have the hearts, my dear Sinead, she doesn't care that I wrote a book. She doesn't care that I'm here speaking to you. The only thing that enables me to be the grandfather she needs is for me to have her heart. Do you follow me? This is the relationship. And if we lose our children here, we don't ever get our children here. And a growing number of parents have never even experienced having the hearts of their children. And if the children give their hearts to each other, then they risk it being broken. It's not in safekeeping. And if that happens, this whole process reverses, and children become preoccupied with very superficial attachment, which is what texting and Facebook is all about. It is empty intimacy. It's now being called by leading experts. It is the ultimate pursuit of proximity, but it never fulfills. It addicts. Those on Facebook are lonelier than those not. There is nothing, it is going in the wrong turn, and that's a concern. Why? Because we are not providing the conditions that allow our children to fall into attachment with us. They need time. And this capacity for relationship needs to be fully developed. And if everything develops fully, by the 6th year of life, it will occur to a child that they do not want to have any secrets that would come in between. That now closeness means being known and heard from the inside out, that somebody gets you, that somebody understands you. And so they don't want to have any secrets that would divide. And that gives you the context in which to parent them right through adolescence, because there is this sense. We call this psychological intimacy. We call this emotional intimacy. And what enables me to hold close to my wife when apart, I do a lot of traveling, is, if you look at this in marriage, is that we are not just physically attached. It's not that we have something in common. It's not that we just belong to each other and stand up for each other and protect each other. It's not even that we matter most to each other, because often the kids matter more than each other. It's the fact that we've given our hearts to each other and that we share all that is within our hearts with each other. And that means that we can withstand a lot of other problems that is, the brain no longer has to. You think of the rest. We don't have to be with each other as much when we're like each other. We don't have to be like each other as much when we belong to each other and stand up for each other. We don't have to be that as much when we matter most to each other. We don't have to do that as much when we've given our hearts to each other. And even the love can wane sometimes when we are fully known, we're fully seen. And so this is the answer. And if it appears that if everything went as should be, there would be 6 years where this, between 6 and 12 years of age, where this would deepen, unfold, the capacity for human relationship would unfold. And then would come at puberty the sexualization. And what is happening now with adolescence and sexualization, I have a course on adolescence and sexuality, is because they are undeveloped in their capacity of relationship, their sexuality is undeveloped. And it is completely changed from the sexuality that we knew beforehand in previous generations. It's changing to be all about sameness and senses and belonging, little about emotional and psychological intimacy. And sexuality can only be as developed as you are. And this is why our children are changing. Their sexuality is changing. All of this is changing because this is the foundational human potential. We have a capacity for relationship like no other animal, like no other mammal, like no other primate. We have this, but it must be developed, and we must give the conditions for it. All of these are seeking. They're all seeking a togetherness. All seeking. And they must find what they are seeking. They must find to be able to provide the nurturance. It's only when what we seek for is found does the child rest momentarily from the pursuit of proximity, and where we have the trunk, so to speak, of growth. Play translates into a playful spirit, a playful attitude. We have the forward edge of realizing our potential. And if this was put into a nutshell, this is what it would look like. But where should our investment be as a society? Where should our investment be as a family? Where should our investment be? It should be in this attachment infrastructure. If we lose the attachment infrastructure, we lose the ability to bring our children into their full potential. this becomes the most important thing of all. It's not just baby bonding. It's not just superficial connection. It is a full capacity for relationship, and this is meant to be. It's meant. They're meant to attach to those who are responsible for them. So when children don't find what they're looking for, or they become attached to their peers, they become incredibly restless. These are signs of children at work. And the signs are relentless pursuit of proximity, closeness, contact, connection of any kind. There are the average teenager now texts 3,000 to 4,000 times a month. And it has become an incessant activity. Many are trying to connect even when they're right with each other. And still there is that connection, feverish, addictive. It's now been shown that the internet connectivity or texting and so on is more addictive than cigarettes and alcohol because it doesn't deliver. You never get what you're seeking because it has to be provided in the sense of a deeper relationship. Anxious clinging, clutching, imitating, conforming, demanding. Continuous striving to make contact, to belong, to fit in, to be liked, to measure up. These are all signs of a child at work, not a child at rest. Working for attention, approval, significance, mattering, love. A child should never have to work at our love. When it comes to being peer-oriented, they're working continually at this. Working at approval. They should never have to work for it. Status, sameness, recognition, specialness, and belonging. Preoccupied with the depersonalized pursuits like winning, status, being attractive, achievement, being cool, being normal. These become the depersonalized pursuits that all represent somehow being more favored, being more special. And obsessed with video games, texting, Facebook, and social media. These are the statistics that are coming in that are quite worrisome, going along with our children in trouble. And so this is what they must rest from, is the pursuit and preservation of proximity. The only one who can truly answer it are us, the adults who are meant to be responsible. We are their best bet. And we need to find our way back to this, where we get the support that we need to do only what we can do, is truly be the answer to our children's attachment needs. There's a second rest. Rest from futile endeavors. This is from working at things that will not work, that cannot work, that should not work. So how does a child come to rest from this? This is a different kind of rest. To grow into their potential, children and their brains need to stop doing the things that do not work or cannot work. At the brain level, you can see this. With attachment too, it's amazing. The neuroscientists are studying when mice face social deprivation, isolation, face separation. And studying the brains of this, the actual chemistry, the actual neural transmission. And they find the axons and the dendrites, when facing isolation, actually that's the interface, the relationship between two neurons. The axons and the dendrites, they actually curl up. And they actually go into some kind of atrophy. They don't develop and they don't communicate. It's like when the relationship between people is broken, the relationship between neurons is broken. And it's a direct reflection at the level of the brain. And only in the context of warm invitation to exist in one's presence do the axons and dendrites formally or properly interact, and is there proper brain growth. And the same thing is true in terms of what we call neuroplasticity. The brain will come and try a certain way to read, to write, to interact, and so on. A certain kind of way to do this. And if it doesn't come with success, it will continue on unless the futility is felt. And we'll take a look at that. So futility needs to be encountered before it can be felt. The child needs to hear a no from mom and dad. This can't happen. This won't work. No more stories tonight. We're not going to send the sibling back. We're going to have to live with this now. And all of these kinds of encounters with futility. But it must be felt, and we'll go into this, it's not enough to be known. You can't just say to a child. The child has to feel futility. It must be felt. And I'll go back to that. When futility is felt, the nervous system actually shifts from the psychology of work, the sympathetic nervous system, to the psychology of rest, the parasympathetic nervous system. If it happens very suddenly, if you're really trying to make something work, really trying to make somebody love you to be, and it dawns that, oh my goodness, I'm not invited to exist in their presence. Or part of your brain doesn't get the fact that a loved one has died or a parent has died, and it continues to go to try to act as if they're there, and all of a sudden you realize this, and then suddenly the parasympathetic nervous system takes over. You're chilled, all the blood goes in, and everything, you can feel the sudden shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic, and it can be amazing, especially in grief. It is amazing where this is there. And there is a body language to this, a very interesting body language, is that when futility is felt, the amygdala, the command center, sends signals to the lacrimal glands and the eyes water. And humans are the only creatures capable of tears. And tears have become symbolic over the ages, right from the ancient Greeks, who call the big futilities in life tragedy, that the tear is symbolic of this. And so that is why intuitively we know, when we can recognize when somebody's eyes water, they've got it, that something won't work. And you can feel the energy shift when they found their tears, and sometimes you can feel inside of ourselves, oh my goodness, if I could only have a good cry about this. Only have a good cry. I keep on trying to change this. I keep on trying to make it work, but I can't control another person's decision. I can't make them want to be with me. I can't fight that reality. There's only so much time. I can't do this. And then you can just feel as it sinks in, the eyes water. Now, many of us, as we grow up, try to keep that to ourselves, and so we only cry on the inside. And there's many kinds of human tears to onions, tears to frustration, tears to upset. We can cry over all kinds of things, even tears to joy. But these tears of futility are of a different chemical composition, because when the gear shift changes from sympathetic to parasympathetic, all the metabolic products that are part of the psychology of work need to be released. And in young children, they need to be released quickly. And so when they study the chemistry of our tears that are cried in the tears of futility, they find they're full of these metabolic products that become toxins. And so it actually cleanses us. There's actually a cleansing factor in young children. And why some of us feel better after we've had a good cry about something that we could not change. And so to realize our potential as human beings is a journey of tears. If they're not on the outside, they must be on the inside. What transforms us when we come up against the things we cannot change? And that sinks in. I cannot keep my job. I don't have enough time. She didn't invite me to be her friend. I can't get this, grandma is dying. When it sinks in, and then it moves us to tears, to sadness, to disappointment, the feelings of futility, it comes to what we call the still point. The still point, that is, something must end before something else begins. Something must come to a rest. Winter must come before spring. And if you're from a religious frame of mind here, the resurrection before the crucifixion. This is a basic principle of endings before beginnings, that what couldn't work must come to an end. And this is that process. Only when futility is felt will the child come to the still point of a resting place, releasing energy that can be utilized for growth and development. And this is the key to transformation. This is how we become transformed, by the things that we cannot change. The ancient Greeks knew this. And the ancient Greeks made sure that they had, in literally called plays, the emotion of plays called tragedies, which were for no other reason than to play vicariously with coming up with the futilities of life until we were moved to tears, because without it we would not become adaptive. And that was key. That's a key to our adaptation. We in Canada have lost the wisdom of tears. Nowhere is that around. Even though it's in our research, we pursue a tearless society. And I believe you in Sweden are much like the same. We have gone to our heads. We have gone to thinking our way through. We have lost our ability to become transformed by that which we cannot change. We think we can solve problems with the cerebral cortex, and it is an emotional process. And when children lose their tears, it is not pretty. When they are not adaptive, it is not pretty. And so the brain is considered to be like a maze. And the big thing on a maze is not that what works is stamped in. What doesn't work must be felt. And the maze is blind. It's blind. You cannot see your way through. You feel your way through. That is totally different than what we're trying to do today. You actually feel. Everybody has asked me for my 40 years of consulting for directions. How do I do this? How do I do that? And I say, well, you'll know what doesn't work. You just feel it, and you won't do the same thing over and over again. You can be sure that you'll be a different parent after the second year of parenting than you were at your first. And with your second child than you were with your first, if you only let yourself feel sad about the things that do not work. We're busy trying to think our way through. And we are creatures of emotion. This is already the key to our transformation is through our tears. And you could see it this way, that the key is when we come up against something that doesn't work and it sinks in, we can feel it. This is the key to human transformation. Now, I've just listed some of the futilities in a child, holding on to good experiences, making something work that doesn't. These are all common futilities for every child. The research shows that children must have their tears relatively much in their first few years of life to ever be ready for the life at 5 and 6 years of age. But also, for children to have their tears, they only feel safe to have their tears in the arms of those that they are attached to. Most of our children are away from us in the day-to-day life when things aren't working. They cannot afford to have their tears. In fact, they're penalized for having their tears. Tears are not considered. They must not have their tears there. All kinds of things, being smarter than one is, being perfect or avoiding failure, controlling circumstances, knowing the future, so many of these things, winning all the time, being bigger than one is, being best at everything, being wanted where one isn't, doing anything one wants, getting one's way all the time, knowing what's going to happen, avoiding upset. These are normal futilities. The signs of restlessness in the face of this futility, children who have lost their tears, who have no safe place for their tears. I worked with many of them who were delinquent. They had no tears for years. The disturbed. They were all stuck, the tears. Many of them talked about the lump in their throat. It is only the recovery is. I learned as a therapist that I could not heal anybody. All I could do is create a place of safety where they could have their tears about the things that didn't work in their life. Nature had a way of healing. All I could do was to give the conditions. Do you follow me? We all have things that we must adapt to. We all have holes in our own, there were lacks in our own upbringing. None of us got a perfect invitation to exist in our parents' presence. They all had their own problems that were there. We all have things that to cry about. And now as we get older, there's so little time. And we're losing friends. And there's things we cannot hold on to. And there's no way of adapting to this without tears. If we don't have our tears, then we do the same things over and over and again. We get stuck and we get rigid and our brains lose their plasticity. and our brains need that plasticity. Alzheimer's is when, yes, certainly there's an aging, and the brain goes to find the same way to retrieve a memory, and it can't. It needs to be plastic. It needs to find another way. And that is the whole issue. And that is an issue, again, of neuroplasticity. And so signs of restlessness, they cannot accept limitations or restrictions. We often call these children entitled, or we used to call them spoiled. They cannot let go of futile demands, obsessed with getting one's way. They can present as spoiled, entitled, or demanding. They get stuck in futile or perseverating attempts to effect change. They don't learn from failure. They do the same thing over and over again. That doesn't work. They are stirred up with attacking energy because when it doesn't move, when mad doesn't move to sad, then they get stuck in feeling in full of attacking energy that want to hit something, want to attack something, and our children are increasing. Their attacking energy is increasing, and it's a direct result of not having the tears. When even a 3-year-old, you know when they are hitting, when they're smashing, when they're in tantrums, they have not yet had their tears about something they could not change. Aggression is always the first sign of a lack of adaptation, and that is increasing in our children. It's increasing, and so there's a lack of adaptation. If alarmed, the child will be stuck in a chronic state of agitation, tension, and restlessness. And if possessing a learning disability, they will keep on trying to learn in ways that do not work. If they do not have the sadness. I don't know if the story of Helen Keller has been translated into Swedish. I would hope it would. It'd be such a wonderful story about a child born blind who is non-adaptive, full of aggression, violent, uncultured, uncivilized, and impulsive. Comes into a relationship with an adult who cares for her, who becomes her mentor, and in that safety, in that place, finds her tears. And it's through her tears that she becomes an example of incredible adaptation, where she becomes an example to us all of adaptation, of how to rise above one's limitations, etc. But it's a journey of tears. And this becomes absolutely essential. And so I think this would be a good time, right? It's noon, and I had one more kind of rest, the rest from impulses, but we'll continue on with this after lunch and then get to the other two essential experiences. Have a good lunch.